Thanks for joining us for Khari Free at Last on Bounce23 TV. I'm Khari Enaharo. The completion of the long-awaited Longstreet Bridge could spark the revitalization of the Near East Side. While the bridge is wonderful, it's what's on the wall of the bridge that created uproar. The Longstreet Bridge wall has pictures of black people who have made a difference in Columbus. The controversy is not about who is on the wall, but who was left off the wall. Joining me is TalkTainmentRadio.com host, the Reverend John Coates, community organizer, Yolanda Robinson, and civil rights leader and businessman, the great conceptualizer, Lawrence Auls. How you doing there, L.A.? My man.
I'm fine.
Okay, it's not who's on the wall, it's who's left off the wall, Reverend Coates.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to note that any type of development in our community is good, okay? And so the wall is beautiful. It's nice to see something new as infrastructure is decaying across the land. It's a new bridge
it's
that's
new.
headed into...
Oh, it's nice. Oh, my God.
And you know, and it was good to see everybody from the community get together to dance once again.
Would you get to your point? Oh, buck dancing on the bridge. I keep forgetting. Anyway, go ahead.
That's your words. Not mine. But,
anyway.
But yeah, there were a lot of names on the wall, but yet there were some glaring omissions from the
Really?
wall as well. Yeah, people that you just knew would be on the wall
Like
were not
who?
on the
Like
wall.
who,
Like
for
the
example?
first black police chief. James Garfield Jackson,
Not
you
on
know,
the
where was
wall?
he? Yes, the first black fire chief, Ned Pettis. You know, where were they? And it seemed as if that just maybe there were omissions because people might have been on the outs with the administration, or they might be in some political
and those on the wall might have been on the end.
Right,
Is that what you said? Oh,
Well, you had
are
Jeanette
something.
Bradley,
Jeanette Bradley's not on the wall?
Janet Jackson,
Oh.
Alex Shoemake, who was the first black African-American to the Chamber of Commerce and is on the Board of Trustees at Ohio State University.
President of the Board of Trustees at the Ohio State. Right.
Wow,
Goodness.
these are major
Judge Robert Duncan, was he on the wall?
no, just
Federal judge.
Wait a minute.
Counsel to
Bobby
governors.
Durham, Frank Shear. There's a lot
Lawrence
of people.
Auls is not on the wall?
But
Khari Enaharo is on the
interestingly
wall.
enough,
Wait a minute, I thought I was on the wall.
No.
Too controversial.
Lawrence Auls.
well,
No more ex. Minister
God.
Donnell.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot.
Lawrence Auls.
I think she just hit on the point I was going to make is that
Come on, Professor.
risk takers tend to be not on the
Bill
wall.
Moss is on the wall.
Well, I said
What they got here? One.
I said they tend not to be on the wall
Why?
as a major group.
Why?
Well, simply because
So
of their,
wait a minute.
standing
If
with
risk
white
takers
people,
are not on the wall, by implication, what are you saying?
Well, because they are generally not in favor
Don't
by
talk around it. Don't talk around it. He's trying to be slick.
By
He's
the
saying
white
risk
community.
takers are not on the wall. So what you're saying is that who's on the wall are not risk takers. Is that what? Are beneficiaries of the risk takers? Is that what you're saying?
Well, there is a class of people who took risk that created the people that you're talking about that are on the wall.
Is that
And that's
true,
what's the
Reverend
difference.
Coates?
It's very true. It's very true. Adam Clayton Powell once said that an irritant in a society will never be respected, but later on, they might be remembered, or they
Preach,
may not
Bishop,
be
preach.
remembered.
Now,
Thank you
this
so much.
is
Thank you.
Bishop John Coates. I want y'all to
Not
know
yet,
that.
not yet, not yet.
You had Margaret Willis. And she fought
Strong advocate.
a strong advocate for poor people. Anybody that knew Margaret Willis, she was with the welfare rights.
Yes.
And of course, you had Lolita Clark that did a lot for Head Start. I worked under her, and these were pioneers, like icons that really helped people. We
That
miss them.
raised
miss
us
them,
from where
you know?
we were.
Yeah,
And that's the problem. Maybe it's better. Maybe we just should have put some pictures up there. Or some art. Maybe that's better.
I mean,
Because
that's
any kind of wall you
empty
put up,
face. You're always going to miss people. And that's why the
somebody.
complaint isn't about people that are on the wall.
Right.
Because Curtis Brooks is on the wall. There's
Yeah.
there's important people that's
Curtis.
on the wall, but yet, you know, there's so many that aren't.
And that's the problem that a lot of people are having with. That's what created the uproar. Am I right, Yolanda?
It did. I got 189 names people called from your radio station, and then that people that I knew that I personally worked with when I was at the Ohio State University. These people didn't get paid. you know, and they spend a lot of their time.
But a lot of the Ohio State people, they did it for Ohio State. We're talking about people who did it for the black community in Columbus.
You're just like people from Ohio State didn't do it for the black community. Dr. Nelson, I worked with him for almost 20-some years.
Don't get her excited
and
now.
let me tell you,
Wait, hold on.
He risked time with his family. He fought for black
Yes, he did.
faculty.
Yes, he did. So did Charles Ross.
And so did Professor Charles Ross. Yes.
Dr. Hale.
Yeah.
Dr. Frank Hale, who was an icon
Well, wait a
at
minute,
Ohio
who
State.
put this list
I
together
don't
then?
know who did it, but
There was a
Wait a minute, stay
selection.
right there. Stay right there. Integration or independence? Up next on Khari, Free at Last. Y'all stay with me. Welcome back to Khari Free at Last on Bounce23 TV. I'm Khari Enaharo. Why are those who want racial integration, assimilation, and racial dependency valued way above those who fight for black political independence and economic self-reliance? Joining me is TalkTainmentRadio.com host, the Reverend John Coates, Yolanda Robinson, civil rights leader and businessman, the great conceptualizer Lawrence Auls. Now, if you are an integrationist, if you want assimilation, if you want dependency, you are lauded. You are put on the cover of all the great black magazines. You are feted throughout the nation. But when you start talking about economic independence, self-reliance, you are poo-pooed and put into the ground. Why is that, Lawrence Auls?
Well, it's because there's a misunderstanding on behalf of the white community that those people are in its best interest, meaning they made the wrong bet, in my opinion, back in the 60s and 70s, or maybe going back further. The struggles that, that us as descendants of slaves have is how do we as a group get up and go forward, not how a talented few.
And now the conservatives get to talk about black folks and say, well, they're dependent on the government dole, their government handouts. And we saw a whole litany of that. And that could have been taken care of if Black Wall Street had been allowed to proliferate, if the black Negro baseball leagues and sports had been allowed to grow. You would have had independence and self-reliance.
Our buying into integration killed independent black business, okay? But there's an
old phrase. It killed independent black anything.
Look, but there's an old phrase that says that the revolution won't be televised, but it won't be financed either well. And the things that we do finance, those entities such as the church does not necessarily invest into the revolution.
We seem to praise people who push integration in our community, not financial independence, not black self-reliance, none of that. We put those people down, but we praise people who want diversity, who want to be friendly to this group, friendly to that group, want to be multicultural. Why is that, Yolanda? You come out of the university.
Well, I don't think there's nothing wrong with wanting to work with people, but you have to have a black consciousness. When you go in, you have
Give me a definition of a black consciousness.
You have to think about your people and remember the people that, because even if you go into those groups, the racism still exists.
Look, every group I know has their own independence.
Yeah.
The Chinese develop for China. The Irish develop for Ireland. The Italians say, that's Italian, all the time. They push their brand.
But everybody does not have the same,
because
everyone does not have the same experience that we have come out of within this country.
What do you mean?
We were conditioned not to support one another. And because of that conditioning, then today you don't see support. So a lot of successful African Americans feel that their success alone is a contribution to the race. As old white folks used to say, a credit to your race.
Yeah.
So
And
then those people who become integrationists, those people who blend in, those people who don't raise holy you-know-what, those are the ones that get proclaimed as our role models. Is that right, Lawrence Auls?
Well, yeah, but they're not. And that's what the problem is. In other words,
What do you mean they're not?
We have 50 years of experience of watching the experiment take place. And we can talk about which parts worked, but we can also talk about the failures. No matter how you look at the metrics of black standards, we're in last place in business, last place in education.
Yeah.
There's 3.3% of doctors that are black, which is a fallback position. We no longer have a black police chief. We no longer have a black fire
superintendent
chief,
of school.
you know, or even a superintendent of school.
But you got a black president of Ohio State who's now catching what because he fired the man.
We're in a state of crisis. We are in a state of crisis.
Oh, that couldn't be. We just got the bridge built. How can we be in a state of crisis?
It's more than just the bridge. We, you know, we're not getting minority contracts. You know, we go out and vote.
Well,
we're not getting the jobs, but we don't have anybody else saying, hey, you know, there needs
the
more
east
voices
side
out
of
there.
Columbus, Ohio,
That's right,
is being rebuilt by people that don't
You said
live
at one
there.
time there was 63,000. It's down to what, 13,000?
13,000.
Where did they go?
No, they were scattered. There was a law put together in Indiana at one time. You know what it was called? It was called the Negro Scatterization Act. They literally did not want black people to come
And
here.
then they later came up with the name gentrification. Which we see happening in front of us.
Urban renewal.
No, but the point is the question that the country has to answer, and it took some maturity on both parts, is whether or not it is in everybody's best interest to have a healthy black community or one that is dysfunctional.
Totally dependent.
Yeah. Well, it was concluded that it was dysfunctional, then it was easier to deal. Except now everybody's paying the price because the Chinese and others are competing with the whole of the United States. And guess who the problem is? It's us, because we were tricked into being dysfunctional. We were stopped. It's not as though we didn't try, but those who tried the hardest were harmed the most, pushed out of the way, put in out, you know, they were not in favor.
They were not.
However, those are the types of persons who will, in fact, save the country going into the next century.
So if you stand up and take a stand, and you really take a hardcore stand for real issues, not these phony issues or not these creative stuff to get you press, you really get smacked down, don't you, John?
You can get smacked down unless you have a support mechanism in place and a branding mechanism. No, you cannot.
Once they see the smackdown, they disappear.
You cannot decide to be a leader without having a reinforcement, a support basis in place. You cannot just decide to do it because because you will not last long. In fact, like for instance, you cannot be an effective advocate unless you have the ability to dig into people's trash that dig in yours. You must know the rules of engagement and of warfare, or you will not survive.
You know what he just said? He said you got to have your own Secret Service agency. He said you got to have your own CIA. You got to have your own NSA. You got to be able to counter those who are countering you. That's what you're saying.
You have to have intelligence. You have to have information and intelligence, because if you don't, you won't survive.
Yolanda, you were going to jump in here.
I was saying that, you know, we don't need one leader. We need a lot of people, because they'll wear a leader down. I have worked with the leaders. They spend a lot of time, you know, with their family. They away from their families. They don't, hardly eat. Just having a compassion, the real folks, having a compassion for working for our folks. And those are the people that like Jerry Dole. These people are actually got
We need to use the Jesse Jackson model. The Jesse Jackson model. We need to support our...
Jerry Dole, stay right there, hold on. Who are the keepers of the culture? Up next on Khari, Free at Last. Welcome back to Khari Free at Last. I'm Khari Enaharo. Who are and who appointed the keepers of the culture of black people? Is it the artists, the musicians, the dancers, people who believe and want racial integration, or people who believe in being united and independent? Joining me is TalkTainmentRadio.com host, the Reverend John Coates, Yolanda Robinson, and civil rights leader and businessman, the great conceptualizer, Lawrence Auls. Listen, Mr. Conceptualizer, because in the 80s, I used to call him the great conceptualizer, because he can conceptualize stuff. Who are the keepers of the culture?
Well, there's two questions. One is, who says the people that are there, and you use artists, because I love artists. They help interpret reality, right?
But they don't create the culture.
Well, right. The real parties are your entrepreneurs. People who create ideas and turn them into physical things. It's like magic.
You're saying risk takers.
Yeah.
Risk takers are who? Are they the keepers of the culture?
In business, they're called entrepreneurs. In science, they're called innovators.
Wait. That doesn't answer the question. John, who are keepers of the
you're
culture?
saying one thing, but giving definition is something else.
Yeah.
A keeper isn't necessarily a creator. So
Right.
maybe an artist is a keeper of the culture.
Yes, he
but
is.
what we're talking about are innovators, creators of the culture. And
Right.
if you're a
Artists
creator,
don't keep the culture of German people.
But we
they
just
don't
watch,
keep the culture.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they
do.
They
Yes,
do
they
not.
do.
Yes,
Yes,
they
they
do
do.
not.
They do all day
Give me
long.
evidence.
However, they have what they call patrons. Patrons are normally people who have earned or have resources, and they provide
That is not
them
a
to the
keeper of
artist.
the culture.
I think they
That
tell.
is not
I
a
think
keeper.
they tell the culture.
Give me a
to the-
definition
to
of
the
keeper.
paintings
A
and to
keeper
the
is someone who
works.
maintains and preserves. Okay,
All right.
and what we
That's
just
not
and
an
what
artist.
the law, what
Artists
happened
change.
on the Long Street Bridge. There are people's faces and names that are memorialized as long as that stone
Immortalized,
stays in,
yes,
as
immortalized.
long as it stays in place.
Right.
Okay, they're there. It's
Yeah.
kept. It's theirs. It's
So are they keepers of the culture?
in this case, they are keeper of a culture.
And so anybody that's not on there is not a keeper of the culture? Is that what you're telling me?
Not at all. The point that this whole discussion is not to denigrate anybody.
I can't hear you.
Is not to put down anybody who is on the wall. The question is there a category of people who were not properly respected and recognized?
Not properly vetted.
Respected.
And recognized.
No, yeah, because vetting is about who's
That's
choosing.
different. Right.
That's choosing.
Right.
We're saying
Well,
that...
somebody chose.
Well,
somebody chose. Somebody chose somebody and decided not to get against somebody else.
The great thing about your announcement on your show recently, and the young lady sitting next to me happens to be, guess what?
What?
We asked people to choose from the community itself.
What did they say, Yolanda? Did they choose?
I got 180 names. I mean,
Just that quick.
And it just keeps coming. There's a lot of people that may not. I think they help with the culture. You know, I call them the make it happen people. These people don't get recognized, but that they spend time. Like remember working with Carol Knoll. You'll never hear about the work that she did when she was working with Coming Home.
Right.
You'll
And
never
other
hear.
projects.
And some of those other individuals that work just as hard, and they make those people that are.
But they weren't in the
wall.
loop?
Not to mention.
They weren't in the
They weren't
loop?
in the loop.
And not
Is that
to
what it
mention
is?
the Cornell McClarys of the
Oh, yeah,
world,
Cornell
and
McClary,
others that you
Charles
thought would have been on,
Tennant. I mean,
such
there's just a whole lot of
Dr. John Roseman,
Dr. John
who
Jim
was on
Roseburg?
campus.
Jim Roseburg.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
But we could go on and on.
the list is endless, and that's one of the problems.
We wanna
with this
tell
thing.
our story.
How far do we go? Would it
Yeah.
have been better to have just said, look, let's put some pictures of our struggle up, or let's just put some art up? Because once you start naming names, where does it end?
Well, the biggest lesson I think that we learned, that I've learned from the wall, is that it's important for us to recognize our own and not to be dependent upon a government entity to say, oh, we're going to recognize you now. So then we start this great debate on who should be recognized and who
So in order to complete the wall, what needs to happen, Lawrence?
Well, I think the black community itself has to choose, help finance the presentation of people on the wall.
Of the next phase of it.
the next phase.
And what would that do? Then you still got some people come along and say, well, my mama should have been up there, my daddy, my uncle did this.
I
But
think
interestingly
where does it
enough,
end?
well, it doesn't have to end.
No.
The question that we're starting to deal with is what is the criteria that should be used? How do you evaluate a risk taker? How do you evaluate their impact? And it doesn't mean that because you had a little impact that you shouldn't be recognized. It just simply means that we should find a way to honor and respect people who gave a real contribution.
It would have been
Now, wait
easy.
a minute. He said something very key.
A real contribution.
Did you hear what that
Yeah, I
word?
heard
He put real in there.
A real
So what are
contribution.
you trying to say?
Well,
is there an unreal contribution?
Well, listen, since we have
Don't
been,
dance around it,
since
Mr.
we have been
Politician.
here as slaves, there are people who have had positions of power who controlled us but did not have real contributions to make.
Best interest at heart.
So that doesn't, so prominence itself does not tell you about contribution.
Wow.
Name recognition does not tell you about contribution. It needs to be a thoughtful analysis of what that is.
What is contribution?
Contribution means you change an ugly situation to make it better. And in some substantial way.
Effect.
That's right.
On
making it better.
Yes, on making it better.
Because there are some people who made it worse.
Oh. Yeah. Not looking for the names of the big drug dealers or pimps
Right.
that everybody knows, but
but they had an impact.
They had an impact, right?
But they made it worse.
But they made it worse.
Might be the reason why some of the times we're in the state that we are, because of that negative impact.
I'm certain.
And so what you're saying is that if we're going to go about this in the right way, we have to change the way in which we do it.
The criteria.
We've got to have some criteria and some guidelines and some standards.
It would have been easy to establish a website and ask for people from the community to submit names with bios. That would have been simple.
Public hearings all over the
Exactly.
city.
Then you can say that it was
grabbed it.
that
So
at
you
least
say
you received
truly,
it.
yeah, you truly did it. All right, paying back those who sacrificed so much. Up next on Khari, Free at Last. Welcome back to Khari, Free at Last. I'm Khari Enaharo. And finally, how should we honor those who have sacrificed and dedicated so much for the advancement of black people in Columbus and around the world? Joining me is TalkTainmentRadio.com host, the Reverend John Coates, Yolanda Robinson, civil rights leader and businessman Lawrence Auls. All right, Lawrence, how should we honor those who have sacrificed and dedicated so much to the advancement of black people?
Well, I don't think it's a statue. I don't think it's being on the wall in particular. I don't think it's being in the newspaper. It is acknowledging that other people respect them. Now, how they decide to manifest it, that's on them. If they want to put up a wall, if they want to put up a statue. But the key is to honor the work that people do in a lifetime that changes things for the better. And this is the cautionary note to my so-called white friends. If they are contributing to the growth and development of the black community, that is a direct benefit to the so-called white community, and they're the ones that need to stop subverting and fighting it, because, as Jesse and others have said, we're all in the same boat. So if our children are healthy and making good grades and all the rest,
it's good for everybody.
It's good for everybody.
It's good for everybody.
And so they're just being incorrect in doing that.
John, should we, I mean, why is it, look, if I do something, I do it because I believe in it. Whether you respect me or honor me or not matters less. So when you step forward and you're committed to something, what do you care about whether somebody honors you or not? Well, what difference does it make?
Well, my note to my so-called white friends. I like that. Look, the best way that we can
from a white-haired gentleman.
Right. But he's been white-haired for the last 30 years, at least I know.
Well, 40 years.
The best way I think we can honor those who we need to honor is not through, as Lawrence mentioned, through a statue, through a wall, through a plaque, but through our actions. Self-improvement is the basis of community development, and we can't behave in a way that is contrasting what many of these people fought to develop.
So in essence, as opposed to going forward, we're moving backwards.
We're moving
backwards. Is that what you're telling me?
We're moving backwards. We're not, our actions don't correspond with the time and with the sacrifice that was made previous. So maybe it's an insult to put certain revolutionary people, those that made a real contribution to our community's names, and memorialize them, but yet as a community, we don't act and disrespect them through our actions.
Think about the number of people who have chosen African names and are out busting people upside the head, selling drugs, doing all kind of disrespecting the honor of the language, of those words that were supposed to have been a high standing when you and I were coming through.
Well,
am I right, Yolanda Robinson?
You're right, but there's also some other things that we had some high standards for, you know, such as giving back. You know, when we were talking about our elders, and Billy Brown is one of the persons that I admired when I was coming up.
Billy and Leela.
And Leela, and of course, and Mr. Lynch. But they always talked about that you had a responsibility to your community of giving back and helping another person, and that's African American. You had that responsibility for your community, and to make the next generation better. We've lost that.
By the way,
yes, Lord.
Let me say this. I did see an example of young people giving back. I watched Trey Burke and young Schellinger do an event at East High School because they chose it to bring their buddies, rich buddies in town. And I watched his mother, and I was really proud of that impulse. That's who we are supposed to recognize.
And I've seen LeBron James do some of the same stuff.
He has many athletes, But it's a shame that much of the philanthropy that takes place in our community, it takes place by artists and athletes. You know, philanthropy.
They're the ones who's got the money, pretty much.
Yeah, but it should be, our businesses should have been strong enough by now to be the major #1 philanthropist in our society.
Well, integration killed those businesses, y'all say. Thank you to TalkTainmentRadio.com host the Reverend John Coates, Yolanda Robinson, and civil rights leader and great conceptualizer Lawrence Auls. And thank you for watching Khari Free at Last on Bounce 23 TV.